what's interesting to me is I am a roboticist, I'm an engineer, and the Odysseus lander, which is the first lunar lander in quite a while that works perfectly. You may have seen that a couple of weeks ago there was a Japanese lander. It did the landing maneuver perfectly, and then it flipped itself upside down at the very end for some reason. We're still trying to figure out why it did that. So it's like somebody's been playing Kerbal Space Program a bit too hard. Odysseus, which landed yesterday, is essentially an engineering demo. It's a commercial system. It was carrying both NASA payloads and corporate payloads, and it was mostly a dress rehearsal for a larger lander because it doesn't actually have that many experiments on itself. The ones that are there are related to being able to find it very precisely, and it did have something unusual for a craft that size, which is it had redundant imaging systems because it's one of the things that they wanted to test. This actually proved very important because the main landing camera decided to take a nap about in the last 5 minutes of the landing. So the backup camera had to take over. It was put there as a way to test it, and it ended up having to do the mission by itself, essentially. Now, note that this is possible because the moon is only about one light second away from Earth. So it is possible for somebody on the ground on Earth with a radio control, like imagine like an old-timey RC plane control. It is possible in a pinch to fly a lander that way. I think the Russians did it in way back when. But the important thing is that if you send a correction command, like switch to the other radar, it will arrive in a second. For a Mars lander, we can't do that because the light speed lag is greater than the reentry window. So any command you send would be too late. There was a mix-up in the last five minutes, and what happened is that the landing camera, which is on the bottom of the craft, it didn't stop responding as so much as it stopped processing images correctly. So this thing is pretty small. There's not a lot of room for a proper radar or anything else. So it had to go with what it could see. Remember, there's no GPS on the moon. This is actually one of the things that Odysseus wants to do is that they want to set up a local positioning system, and it's gonna act as one of the antennas for it. But let's go back to the landing for a second. So this thing is coming
Okay.
down, and its camera acts up. Let's say it's trying to land on my shoulder. The camera acts up. So what they did is that they switched to the other multi-lens camera that's supposed to give you a 3D picture for just one camera. I think that shows in the pictures, and they used that as a rangefinder to be able to touch down softly.
This piece right here that saved the day.
What happens is that this thing here, which is if you look at it, it's probably a 3D camera of some sort. You got this fisheye lenses, so it's probably either a 3D camera or like a 180-degree dome camera. Just by looking at it, you don't have to have looked this stuff up. It was stuck on the outside of the craft. It's not integrated into the craft. It's a science payload. It's an engineering payload in this case. And what happens is that what this will do is that it will try to get a picture converted into a point cloud and actually get 3D information without having two cameras at two different places. And what happened is that when the main instrument that's supposed to do a simpler version of this job for the purpose of landing, just imagine like a sonar rangefinder, except you can't use sonar on the moon, obviously. They switched to this thing to be able to say, okay, we're this close, we're this close, we're this close, and they basically had to use visual information to land, like in that old lunar lander game.